Well, greetings and salutations, everybody, and welcome to this newest episode of Best Movie, Worst Movie. For those of you who don't know what Best Movie, Worst Movie is we take a category every week. That can be a year, it can be a category, it can be an actor, it can be a genre, whatever. And we break down into what we think is the best movie of that category and what we think is the worst movie of that category. Joining me sitting right over here is writer, director, producer, Mr. Robert Meyer Burnett. Robert, how you doing?
Oh, John, I can't wait to do this show. I'm very, very excited. Very excited.
We've been talking about doing this one. And also joining us, of course, Cody Miller is back, ladies and gentlemen. Cody, how you doing, man?
I'm great. Thanks for having me, guys. I'm excited. This stuff, I love. The movies we're talking about today, this stuff, it's just the good stuff. You can't take it too seriously. I think we're going to have a good time.
I'm glad to have you here for it. And just so you know, no more suspense. The category of today's episode, which you probably know because you saw the thumbnail, is natural disaster movies. We're talking now, disaster movies have always been like a major hallmark in Hollywood because it's something that is tangible and real to us. It's something that could happen or things like it have happened. It's something everybody worries about. And so we're going to talk about that. So Rob, I want to, before we get into the best and the worst and stuff like that, like when you think of like disaster movies, like what are some of the big ones what do you think are also some of the more pivotal ones?
Okay, well, I have to tell you, when I was a little kid, my favorite movie was War of the Worlds. But my second favorite movie was When Worlds Collide.
Oh my God.
And that was, we're talking early George Powell,
right?
Early 50s Paramount. And what was so awesome, of course, this star is going to go by the Earth and then it's going to collide with the Earth. But before it gets there, there's all these different disasters. And of course, there was all this early miniature work, all these special effects. They had volcanoes blowing up, cities got flooded. I mean, all the things that we've seen Roland Emmerich do, they did back in the 50s. And when I was a little kid, there was nothing better than seeing large urban areas destroyed. I loved it. And of course, that led to a lifelong love of those kinds of movies. And then, of course, in the 70s, when I was a little kid as well, we had Irwin Allen making Earthquake and Sense Around, which I got to see when I was like 6 or 7. You know, and they installed these giant bass speakers in the theater. That's what Sense Around was.
Yep.
So you'd shake. And it was amazing. And then we got all kinds of disaster movies in the 70s, including one I will be talking about on this show. Some were great, like Towering Inferno got nominated for Best Picture, but some were not so great.
No, a lot of them were not so great. But this is one of the great things about the genre, right? Is one of the cool things is it's a genre and a category of film that, you know, they've been making since the earlier days of Hollywood, right? But they also completely lend themselves to today because they become palettes for these big visual effects extravaganzas. Like what was the one with John Cusack? Was 2012?
2012, yeah.
2012. Like it just gives them an excuse, or the day after
tomorrow. The day after tomorrow.
It gives them an excuse to like paint these huge visual effects spectacles and have these giant action sequences. And whether you're The Rock and San Andreas or whatever, you can have these like huge destruction porn stuff going on in there too. So that's why it's been able, I think, like as a genre in and of itself, it's been able to transfer easily from different eras to now.
Well, it's also because too, you know, we know what it's like to live in the real world, live in a city. And we often, I think, we think ourselves like, what would happen if this building fell over? You know, and
Yes.
and when we live in California, so what if we have earthquakes and will it go too far? And I've often thought when I'm in downtown LA or if I'm in New York, I look around and I think, what would happen? And Roland Emmerich, from the time he blew up the Empire State Building in Independence Day, you know, to what he did in Day After Tomorrow and what he did to Santa Monica in 2012. I mean, I love this stuff. And not only that, I mean, I also loved, I didn't pick one of these, but I would consider kaiju like Godzilla. He's naturally occurring.
I know.
And he smashes.
That's sci-fi.
He smashes.
Yeah.
Well, some of these movies.
If we didn't let Cody pick zombie movies, we cannot let you take Godzilla.
Well,
I texted John. I was like, do zombie movies count? Because I was trying to think of what constitutes for a true natural disaster movie. Because Rob, you said War of the Worlds. And I love War of the Worlds. Like the 2005
the Steven Spielberg film.
I love that movie. But does that movie really Is it really a natural disaster?
No,
because it's
no, that's an alien-made disaster. I thought a lot about this,
Right.
and you know,
And I thought so much about, like, because Titanic is one of my all-time favorite movies. I just rewatched it with my wife, but I'm like, that's not really a natural disaster.
See, I would have allowed. I think I personally would have allowed that.
I would have allowed it too because it
Really?
is. It is a natural disaster.
Well, when I think of natural disaster, I think of something that can't
Is
be
nature?
stopped, and it's nature's fury, right? It's inevitable. The thing with Titanic is they could have prevented that disaster.
Yeah, it's more of a
had they not
disaster
tried
than
to
a
break the
natural
record.
disaster, I guess.
Right.
But
So now we're really splitting hairs.
Yeah.
Here,
But they
I guess,
didn't know
I guess we can really draw the line with zombies, John.
That's where the line is drawn.
but see, zombies are fictional, and a giant iceberg isn't. And it really happened.
Yeah, but Godzilla isn't either.
Godzilla isn't either. I mean, I think we have to draw the line because my favorite is definitely skirting a line, but because I thought a lot about it, I'm like, okay, is this? But it is about ultimately a natural
All
disaster.
right. Well, then why don't we get into it here with, and we'll start off with our best. And, Cody, we didn't start with you last time, so let's go to you first. We know it's not a zombie movie, but for you, what is the best natural disaster movie?
We will do zombie movies eventually.
Eventually we will, absolutely.
Yeah, for sure. I'll take you guys back to 1997. Two amazing volcano movies came out that year, and I love both of them. One was Volcano with Tommy Lee Jones. That was close. I think I just have a great obsession with volcanoes for some reason.
Oh, yeah.
I don't really know what it is. I've always been obsessed with things just coming out of the earth and exploding since I was young. Anyway, but the movie that I'm picking as my favorite, as the best, we're starting with the best, correct?
Yeah.
Just to be clear. Okay, the best was Dante's Peak. Because, you see,
With James Bond.
That's right. So that's what I'm getting at here. Similar to Rob and I share a big love for James Bond. I grew up on all the old 70s and 80s, all the way back to Dr. No, all the James Bond films. And so Pierce Brosnan as a young kid for me was like my hero. And a few years after the movie came out, I think I saw this around 2000. So it was out on, home. I remember going and picking it out at Blockbuster Video and renting the VHS tape. And it was basically James Bond fights a volcano. And I love this movie because the thing with so many disaster movies is some of the times it doesn't really know what it is. Is it too serious, or does it ride the line of humor? Is it funny? Is it not? With Dante's Peak, I felt like you basically got what you were sold. You got Pierce Brosnan basically doing the suave gentleman character that he always is great at. And there's a town that's in distress and a volcano's coming. It's real plain and simple. But I also bought into the love story. I also bought into, the mayor of the town who's trying to take care of everyone. And the boss, typically you've got one guy who's just kind of the a-hole who's like, this is never going to happen. But there were actually layers to that character, to Pierce Brosnan's boss in the movie. And when everything explodes, I mean, I don't know what it would really look like if a volcano erupted and there's a town at the base of this volcano, but everything just basically explodes. And then they're just trying to run away from this volcano. But, obviously you get him basically being James Bond, but he's also human. Like, he's not invincible. Like, towards the end of the movie, he breaks his arm. He gets stuck in this car. I mean, I'm not going to ruin the movie for anybody that wants to watch it, but it's to me, it felt really realistic. And I almost picked Volcano with Tommy Lee Jones because I love Tommy Lee Jones just being Tommy Lee Jones fighting a volcano in LA. But I'm going to go with Dante's Peak as my all-time favorite because it's the most rewatchable to me. I know I said this on the last podcast we did together, but rewatchability to me is a huge, huge deal. And I love disaster films and I love Pierce Brosnan. And so that is why maybe it's not the greatest film of all time, but it's certainly my favorite disaster film.
I like your pick. I mean, I often think a lot about that era too, like when Dante's Peak and Volcano both come. And I agree with you. I think I picked Dante's Peak over Volcano. That's me. And so I like that pick. All right. So we've got Dante's Peak as one of the picks. All right. Mine is not the same. Mine is different, but similar to yours, Cody, where there were two films that came out roughly around the same time with similar things. Deep Impact came out. And I like Deep Impact.
I love
actually
Deep
very
Impact.
much. I like it a lot. But a movie that a lot of people shower with disrespect is actually my favorite one, and that's Armageddon. I love Armageddon. All my bags are packed. I'm ready to go. I love this movie. It's got everything that I want in a natural disaster movie. It's got, like you were talking, Cody, about you want to be able to skirt that line between like how serious is it, but also, you know, have humor and stuff like that. Armageddon for me had those moments. Steve Buscemi in it is gold. I'm a huge Michael Clarke Duncan fan. Like I've always loved Michael Clarke Duncan. Obviously, you got Will Patton in there, Ben Affleck, Owen Wilson. And obviously Bruce Willis leading the way. So it had all of it, like a thing about a big movie coming or a big asteroid coming to destroy the Earth, and this last minute attempt, and you got all these characters that I think are just fun and wonderful through the way. It's like we don't want to pay taxes, no, like ever. I just love this. I even bought in the stupid little love story, and I don't care what anybody says when they're having the funeral at the end. And they've got all their portraits up. I'm not going to say, I'd be lying if I said I cried, but I got a little misty-eyed at that, right? And when he tricks Affleck to get on that ship because he's going to save him and he's going to save the world, this guy, like it's everything, it's all the good things in Michael Bayism, right? Everything that's good about Michael Bayism, I think is manifested in Armageddon. So like, and again, they didn't skimp on having some big destruction at the same time and all that kind of stuff. I thought there was great tension, like when they're drilling and everything, they built in tension, humor, all that kind of stuff. I know it's a movie that gets a real bad rap, but I don't care. My favorite natural disaster movie is Armageddon. So I'm going with that. So far we have Dante's Peak, a volcano movie. We have Armageddon, a killer asteroid movie. Rob, you're up. What is the best natural disaster?
Okay, here's my favorite natural disaster movie, which, by the way, going in, I had no idea it was a natural disaster movie. I thought it was something completely different. And indeed, it changes what genre of movie it actually is. It starts out with them opening a time capsule that was buried 50 years in the past. They open it up at a school, and this movie stars Nicolas Cage. And it was directed by Alex Proyas. It's called Knowing. Now, I didn't know anything about this movie. I missed it in the theaters. I knew that it had the Earth and something was going on. So at first, you know, you're wondering, okay, and suddenly there's a piece of paper that this girl had written down 50 years ago, and it turns out that on this paper she had prophesized all of these natural disasters that had occurred in the 50 years during the time this was buried. So she could never have known these disasters were happening. So plane crashes, and we get to see a few in the movie.
Yeah.
There's all kinds of, so it's a multiple disaster movie. And I was like, what is this movie about? You know, and as I'm watching it, it's kind of an X-Files thing. Is it a spiritual thing? Like, what the hell's happening in this movie? Don't know, but I loved it. This was not a well-reviewed movie. I don't know why people didn't like it. I loved it.
I can't imagine.
You know, it was shot in Australia. It was shot in Australia, but that doubled for Boston because of course it did. You know, and so I'm watching this. I'm with you. Aliens show up. Aliens show up at the end of this movie, and as I'm watching this, I still don't know what is happening in this movie. What is going on? And of course,
you're not doing a great job selling this movie.
Well, you got to watch it. I'm telling you, you're gonna love this movie when you watch it. So because it has I love plane crash movies. Fearless, I loved Fearless. I loved Alive, which has a great plane crash in it. This has a great plane crash in it. You're not on the plane. It's after the fact. But
I just don't know that knowing qualifies.
No, I'll tell you why it does. I'll tell you why it does. Okay, so the aliens come and Nicolas Cage's son is going to be saved and all these other kids. So here's where one of my greatest fears. At the end of this movie, there is a solar flare. There's a solar flare, which, by the way, we just experienced a solar flare recently, last week. A solar flare is sent out from the sun, and it completely fries the Earth at the end of the movie. So this is why I picked it, because it's a solar flare. It's a legitimate.
It does end with an element.
It has no aliens blowing anything up. The aliens just save the kids, the people. But the solar flare and the end of this movie, there's something poetic as you see the solar flare hit the earth and it incinerates, it evaporates the oceans, and it's strangely poetic. And then you see the earth is gone. Like, there's no hope. Nobody survives except the aliens take the kids to presumably live on their alien world or whatever. Here's a new Earth for you, which means a solar flare can come get it at some point. But solar flares are a fear of mine. They have been a fear since I understood what they were, since I was a little kid. And this is the best movie about a solar flare hitting the Earth ever.
All right, so we have Knowing, Dante's Peak, and Armageddon. I don't know if there's anybody watching at home who would have picked any of those films, but these are our picks, damn it, and these are the ones that we're sticking with. Okay, so now we're going to pivot, and we're going to go to the worst. And I have a feeling, I'll start this one off. I have a feeling one of the two of you might also pick this one. I'm not really sure, but I'm going to go with this one. It is the Gerard Butler, which right there could still be several. Geostorm. Geostorm. First of all, you got to understand, I am a big Gerard Butler fan. Like, I love Gerard Butler. From Phantom of the Opera,
I do too.
I have loved Gerard Butler. I think he's terrific. And so you put this thing out, Geostorm, and it's Gerard Butler. And it's like, I'm going to go watch this. I mean, so I did. And listen to the cast. Jim Sturgis, you have Andy Garcia, Ed Harris. I mean, you have a solid cast. Andy Garcia is the most unbelievable president of the United States ever. And the whole notion is, I mean, the premise is sound, right? That mankind at some point has figured out science to be able to avoid natural disasters by being able to literally control the weather. Oh, but what happens, as in so many things, when something good falls into the wrong hands? And this, and just like big thing. First of all, that is a great image. Like that's a terrific image, right? And they start to unleash all this stuff, but it is so bloody ridiculous, strung together with these horrible characters saying terrible dialogue with one unbelievable. Like, again, listen, I don't expect movies. We understand we have to suspend disbelief, right? All I've ever asked is that movie follows its own logic. Whatever a movie says is logic in their reality, like, hey, in a Superman movie, yeah, son from Krypton, he can fly. So you're set up your own set of realities. All I ask is that you stay realistic to what you say is the reality in your movie. And in this movie, they're just constantly crossing every boundary. Like every time they say, well, this is blah, blah, blah in our science, but then they completely go against it. And just the dumbest, stupidest things. And it's one of those movies where people joke about it, but for me, it was really true. I'm like, come on, be over. Come on, credits roll, credits roll. Finally, the credits are rolling. Like, I just couldn't, I didn't want to leave it, but I didn't want to watch another second of it. It is, and it's a damn shame too, because a great cast, interesting premise, and it just completely crapped the bed. So my worst natural disaster movie is, even though it's triggered by man's science, but it's all natural things that happen, I am going with Geostorm, so that's mine. So Rob, Knowing was your best. I am really curious to hear, what is your worst?
I'm dipping back into 1970s. 1978, John, a year after Star Wars came out, and this movie cost 3 times what Star Wars cost. Let me give you this cast. Michael Caine, Catherine Ross, Richard Widmark, Richard Chamberlain, Olivia de Havilland, Lee Grant, Jose Ferrer, Patty Duke Austin, Slim Pickens, Bradford Dillman, Henry Fonda. And it was the last appearance of Fred MacMurray with a score by Jerry Goldsmith. And it was directed by the master of disaster himself, Irwin Allen. The Swarm.
I never saw The Swarm.
The Swarm is a movie about a Texas-sized cloud of African killer bees coming to the United States. And let me tell you, people.
Okay, now I got to watch it.
Let me tell you, this movie, I mean, the joys of this film are such that not only do killer bees destroy towns, do they destroy trains. Perhaps, John, the highlight of this movie is they attack a nuclear power plant.
The bees,
killer bees, and not only do they attack, they somehow.
Okay.
This is the movie that has a nuclear core exposed to the world, where scientists are just walking around outside of it, and the bees come into the nuclear power plant and cause it to melt down, destroying a city. I mean, this film is so bad. I mean, it's been called one of the worst movies of all time, with perhaps a great cast. There is nothing about this movie that is at all realistic. And I'm going to tell you what happens at the end. They lure the killer bees out into the ocean, where they have covered the ocean with gasoline.
I thought you were going to say honey.
No. And they burn up all the killer bees. And they're like, but this could happen again. We have to be ever vigilant. I mean, this was made, Irwin Allen had made The Poseidon Adventure, and he'd made The Towering Inferno, and he only directed 2 movies. This was one, and Raise the Titanic was the other. And let me tell you, even as a kid, like growing up in the 70s, African killer bees, they made kids, we were terrified of them. They're coming to America, man. They're coming to America.
We had murder hornets.
Hornets. And this was actually, this is a literary adaptation. Somebody wrote a book. I think it was like Arthur Herzog wrote this book in 1974. 4 years later, you could go watch a big budget Hollywood movie with a big budget Hollywood cast about killer bees destroying a nuclear power plant.
And lots of people over the ocean.
Oh, and over the ocean. And lots of people, half the cast, there it is. There's the book. Half the cast dies. I mean, people just die. They introduce this poor kid who survives his parents being, and let me just, one of the great joys of this is one of the characters we meet early on whose parents are killed by the killer bees is stung, but he doesn't die. So he's full of bee venom, and he hallucinates that he's being attacked by a giant bee. And I'm telling you, this movie, the joys of this movie, you know what? I don't own it on Blu-ray, but now after this show, I'm going to go see if I can buy The Swarm. Because, look, there's the giant bee. The kid's hallucinating.
Oh, my.
Dude, come on. There's Michael Caine and Catherine Ross.
Are we sure this wasn't Industrial Light and Magic?
Oh, man.
I mean, look at that.
Wow. I'm telling you, this is not Honey, I Shrunk the Kids. Let me tell you. And there it is. The doctors see, no one can see it, but the poor kid in the bed, there's a giant bee. I am telling you, they don't make them like this anymore, John, and for good reason.
The Swarm. All right. So mine was Geostorm. Yours is Swarm. And now, movie I've never seen. Now I got to watch that. I got to see this. Okay, so let's go over to Cody. Cody, Dante's Peak was your best. What is your worst?
Well, I got to say, I don't know if that's exactly true, Rob, if they don't quite make them like this anymore, because there's some pretty bad disaster films still being made. But I've never seen The Swarm, so I'm probably going to go rent that now just to really get that full experience. You sold me, Rob. You sold me. But my pick for the worst disaster movie is one that I remember seeing in theaters when I was 11 years old. This movie stars Hilary Swank. It stars Stanley Tucci, and it stars Aaron Eckhart.
I was going to bring this one up earlier.
Doesn't sound all that bad. But, okay, let me tell you this. The premise of this movie is that the liquid surrounding
Have you told everybody the name of it yet?
Sorry. Well, okay, it's called The Core. The movie is called The Core. The liquid surrounding the Earth's core, which rotates, that's what creates the magnetic field around the Earth that protects us from small solar flares, as Rob just discussed, has for some reason just stopped circulating. Just completely stopped circulating. So the Earth is about to just, get completely wiped out by any kind of magnetic field moving through space towards Earth that happens all the time. And so the United States government's their plan to fix this is to drill to the center of the Earth and drop 4 nuclear bombs. And I remember this movie came out in 2003. Okay, I was 11 years old, and my dad took me to the Suncoast Resort in Las Vegas to go see this movie. There was no one in line, and I remember just walking in, being like, "Wow, we're like the only people here. This will be fun." And sitting in the theater, my dad tells me what the movie's about, and I remember thinking, at 11 years old, you're really going to nuke. Like, we're going to drop bombs in the center of the Earth to fix the Earth. Like, that's the premise. And I got to tell you, this movie struggles with not really knowing what it is. Like, because on one hand, it sounds like it could be goofy and also kind of funny. But then halfway through the movie, you've got these really dramatic, serious scenes where Hilary Swank loses a crew member and she's crying. And then Aaron Eckhart's trying to save him, but she stops him from saving him because they don't want to, jeopardize the mission of drilling to the center of the earth. So one of the crew member dies because there's got to be drama and emotion. And everyone's crying. And I'm like, we're like the scene prior, they hired some random tech guy to hack the internet so that the rest of the world doesn't know what's going on. There's all these natural disasters happening.
What are they trying to suggest?
All these crazy natural disasters happening, and they hire this super nerdy looking dude. And when he's being interviewed for the job, he grabs the guy's Nokia brick cell phone. He's like, "Hand me your cell phone." He grabs it and he takes out a piece of gum and he starts rubbing the wrapper on the phone and doing some stuff. And he hands it back and says, "Now you have long distance calls for free forever, anywhere around the world. There you go." And it's like, and
look,
this is our guy.
Delroy Lindo in the movie.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, Delroy Lindo's in it, man.
He's awesome, actually. He's really funny. So like, he made me laugh, but like, he didn't really fit the vibe of like the whole movie. And then like midway through the movie, you learn that, okay, as they're drilling to the center of the earth, Stanley Tucci's character, who is this like world-renowned, like very egotistical scientist, you find out that one of his projects went wrong, and that's what stopped the Earth's mantle from spinning as they're headed down there, and it just kind of falls off the rails. But anyway, this movie it's pretty much unwatchable. And that's why it's my worst. It's the worst disaster movie because I don't really get anything good out of it. And if you were to just pitch me that pitch, I'd be like, that's a great setup for a great movie. But it's so all over the place in its tone, and it doesn't know what it is. You know, sometimes you watch a good disaster movie with The Rock, and it really embraces that kind of goofiness that it is. And this movie just failed on all levels when, compared to pretty much all other disaster movies. So that's why it is definitively the worst disaster film.
And like the cast, like Jenkins. What's the actor's first name?
Richard Jenkins.
Richard Jenkins is in it. Bruce Greenwood is in it. I mean, Delroy Lindo, Academy Award winner Hilary Swank. I mean, the cast is stacked. And again,
Jackie Cario, who's a French actor, is in it.
The premise has promise. Right? The premise has promise, but it's like, okay, this thing's happening. Well, we got to do this, and we have to come up with 6 different technologies we just don't have yet. And we got to come up with them all right now and start going to the center of the earth. It's like, really?
And I love
the tagline is the only way out is in, which also sounds like the name of a bad porn on Skinamax.
You know what though? We all picked. These are all major studio releases. These are big budget studio movies. Like we could have gone the Asylum route or something. I was worried, but I love
we
the
gotta
fact
stick to the big studio.
That's cheating.
We all picked these big budget studio releases, and it's like, I wonder what it was like to like work in the actual studios when somebody pitches these projects like that. So it's about killer bees, or it's about, they're going to go to the center of the earth and stop the core from spinning, or they're going to, we're going to go to an asteroid and stop it. Like, they're going to land there and we're going to take oil drillers instead of astronauts. Why not just teach the astronauts the old Ben Affleck thing? Why not just teach the astronauts how to drill?
Well, they explain that in the movie, Rob. If you pay attention, they explain that in the movie. So I
have to go back. By the way, I love Armageddon, just so you know.
Oh, I'm glad. I don't meet many people that love Armageddon.
No, Armageddon,
I love it.
Armageddon
I've got to say, I'm sorry. I've got to say I love Armageddon, and I got to go to a presentation by Neil deGrasse Tyson a few years back, and he did a 30-minute dissertation breaking down how Armageddon breaks more laws of physics than any film ever made. And it was amazing. He's such a funny dude as it is, but it was like one of the best things I ever went to. I had a blast. So,
but you know what, though? It's wildly entertaining. And it's one of those movies, if you look at it, I think it has more edits in it than any other Michael Bay movie, even more than some of his Transformers battle sequences. I mean, I love when you're in Billy Bob Thornton is like the head of NASA. And he's awesome in this movie. He's awesome. But whenever you're in the NASA mission control, which should be kind of boring, and the camera is just moving around like you're looking at the greatest action scene ever.
That's what I said. It's the beautiful. Best things about Michael Bayism are in this movie.
Awesome.
Right?
And whenever there's like the flags or something, it's the best.
And heartbreaking, like when certain characters die and things like that, you feel it, like the weight of it. Anyway, that's that. And guys, that will do it for this installment of Best Movie, Worst Movies. We talked about natural disasters. Look, there are so many that we could have gone on about and talked about. And listen, there will always be more natural disaster movies to come because, again, it's just right there for you, right? It's the excitement of it. It's the visual effects possibilities of it. They're going to make more of them, a lot more to come. Maybe we'll have to do this whole category again in a few years. Anyway, I want to thank the people in the room with me right now. First of all, Robert Meyer Burnett. Robert, where can people follow you online?
You can follow me on Instagram at RMBurnett, find me on Twitter at BurnettRM, or find me at Postgeek Singularity on YouTube or on postgeeksingularity.com.
And of course, Cody Miller is joining us again here today. Cody, where can people follow you in all your online adventures?
You guys can follow me on Instagram, just at Cody Miller, and check out my YouTube channel, Cody Miller Adventures. This was fun, guys. Can't wait to do it again.
Yeah, and again, guys, don't forget to come back and join us again next week for the next installment of Best Movie, Worst Movie. I'm John Campea. You can follow me on Instagram or on Twitter, simply at John Campea. That'll do it for us for now, guys. Thanks a lot for being here, and until next time, my friends, bye-bye.